Hello, good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. And it's so lovely to see you, wherever you are, whatever part of the day it is for you. And Toby, Suzanne, thank you so much for joining. I'll definitely be responding to all the comments if I manage. So let me know where you are, what's the weather like, and I'm hoping that we're going to have a wonderful afternoon together. So, a couple of basics. I'm TK, and this is a live stream. It's not necessarily a workshop, so, feel free to relax. Feel free to not to turn on your cameras. There's not even a button to do that. And I'll be talking at you for 35 minutes. But hopefully, I'll make it a good show. So, enjoy. First of all, as always, I usually ask a question to start with. And this one is, what's the favorite team that you've been a part of? Right? Think about, and it doesn't have to be at work. It can be in other places. I'll give you my example quite soon. What's the wonderful team that you've been a part of previously, or maybe the current team that you're a part of is your favorite? Let me know. Louise, Victoria, Carey, lovely to see you here. And thank you for tuning in, as always, my wonderful viewers. So, I'm looking forward to hearing about your wonderful teams, but as I do, I will slowly move on and maybe, just maybe, talk about something that is becoming a bit of a tradition. But before we do so, let's talk about the agenda for today. So, what is it that I'm going to talk about, and what is it that you get from this wonderful workshop? Well, webinar or live show. First of all, as promised, I'll talk about how Google found out how to build great teams. I've done some great research and we'll talk about it today. We'll also talk about why does it work? What they have discovered is theoretical, but practically I'll give you some of my opinions and psychological research as to why it is the case that they get these amazing results. And finally, also, we'll talk about why is it so difficult to implement? Yes, we'll go into the hard stuff and we'll talk about why isn't it so easy to get a great team. But we'll also talk about how to circumnavigate it and how to figure out the right way of dealing with it. And finally, we'll talk about how your managers can embrace it. So let's just go there. So what do we have? Oh, the methodology team. Well, that's a nice one. I've actually, Louise, read as a meteorology team because I've talked about the weather. Anyways, lovely to see you, Margaret and Robin. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. If you've been here before, you might have heard about a tradition, which is me sharing a personal story about my favorite team in this way. So last time I've talked about why I've quit a job. And the tradition is I'm usually showing a picture of like myself when I was young. Because any good story is probably a bit of a blast from the past. So get ready for it because, well, actually, I'm not there in this picture. But I'm there making this particular photo. And this is my very old wargaming club called Monolith Wargaming. And you know what? This has been my favorite team throughout the years. This photo is probably like 25 years old. And little did I know, way back when, that I'll be talking about this particular photo on a webinar to you, my wonderful viewers. But the thing is, when I look at this team, when I look at these wonderful people and think about myself being on the other side of the camera, it's been quite unique. It felt special. I think, everyone accepted each other the way they've shown up. And everyone was, well, there was no ifs and buts. Even though this particular team, Wargaming Sports team, had a clear mission. Everyone knew what the scores were and what games we were supposed to play. No one was bothered by that. In fact, we had fun. I think, we're still friends with most of the people there. And the interesting thing I would say is that even though I had many other teams outside of work and, in various companies, organizations I've been a part of, there was always like an if. There was always something nagging. It was never truly an amazing favorite team. But I'll tell you how you can create one further down the line today. So let me just see. Yeah, the Call of Duty team. In lockdown. That's a cool one. Definitely in lockdown, many of such teams were created because people were in a situation where obviously we all had to make connections anew again. And Joe, lovely to hear, that that you're also into tabletop games. It's not the most attractive hobby, but I'm still at it. I think it has a lot of benefits. Anyways, there's something else that I wanted to talk about, which is you've gave me a lot of data. Thank you so much, everyone that has replied to my question that I have asked you before this webinar about how do you know that you're in a great team? The thing is, I've received more than 80 responses, and it was such a wonderful read. And in fact, it was quite difficult to put it together, but I've managed. So, from your wonderful responses, what I got is, first of all, because there's trust and safety. Many people have said that, and I would wholeheartedly agree. Also, there's open communication. If you think about the jokes that I was making in my wargaming team, that was definitely open, but there's also genuine support. Being there for each other and making sure that the team members always support one another, and it's purely genuine. And finally, which is interesting, a shared sense of purpose. A wonderful team, a great team has a mission, and we'll talk about it some more because this is how you can actually get great performance, and this is why Google was investing so much in that. So Toby is definitely commenting, and Amy, thank you so much. I was like, well, it's been a magical time. When you think about it, there was a lot of hardship in lockdown. But I think for many people, it has also been an interesting time because they've made new connections. They've rediscovered how to connect with others in new, novel ways. And possibly we're still connected. And, that's a great thing that we've had. But I've promised you a bit of a word cloud. So here it is. I've got a question for you. As you're looking at these words, when I do look at them, it just feels a bit warm and fuzzy. So many wonderful words that I got from you. And my question to you, and share in the chat, what is it that you see there that makes you feel like your team might have it? Which of these words do you actually like and really embrace? Which of these words are the ones that you feel you want to have in your team? So, there you go. But let's move on a bit. And what I would like to talk about is, well, you know what? I haven't really introduced myself. So, hello, I'm TK. You probably know me from LinkedIn. I'm a management trainer. And what I do is I help people deal and improve engagement, retention, and performance management, especially if you're an L&D or an HR person. And I'm a certified coach, and I work with quite a few tools. But that's me, and I'm sure if you're a listener, someone that is also on my streams, you know me quite well, but I might not know you. So what I would love to find out is who you are. So it's very easy to do, and if you've been to any of my webinars, you would know how to do that. Essentially, I would like you to put a letter in the chat. If you find yourself in HR or a member of a people team, put A in the chat. If you're an L&D, put a B. Or maybe you're a leader, that's a C. And D is for neither. The beautiful thing is you can definitely put a combination of those. Suzanne, thank you for your words. And Takoya, psychological safety, hold that thought because we will definitely talk a bit about that. So there's a bit of foreshadowing. But I'm also a person that often asks a simple question, which is why? Why should you care? And I can't get PowerPoint to work because I'm pressing the wrong button. So let me just get myself sorted with that. There you go. That's the wonderful slide. Yeah. Why is it important to be here to listen to it? And why is it important to have a great team? Well, in my personal opinion, most of us work in teams. Some do alone, but as people, we need a sense of community. And you've given me a lot in terms of like, okay, what happened during lockdown, how we've made connections. So you can already see that. In fact, our organizations are also like teams, like communities. So building great teams means also building great organizations that these teams are a part of. And finally, this is how you improve engagement, retention, and get high performance, which I will talk about during the course of this webinar. Thank you so much for your wonderful introductions. Yeah, lots of A's and B's, but also some great C's. So managers and leaders, pay attention. Thank you, Antonio. You're AC, so I'll be looking at you and I'll also be looking at what you think about my ideas further down the line, because I'm always open for feedback and challenge. So, do you know what I promised you? I've promised you what Google, or talking about what Google did. Back in early 2012, this wonderful lady, Julia Rozowski, she's actually been an HRBP, and she went in and done a study, a big project called Project Aristotle. What they were trying to figure out is what makes teams great at Google. They have done it with more than 180 teams. They have concluded plenty of in-depth interviews, used lots of statistical models. I think, sadly, she's no longer with Google. They promoted her. But this has been a wonderful project, and they discovered something incredibly interesting. They tried to answer a question. They defined what an effective team is, that there was a bunch of metrics, and they tried to find out what makes such a team. So let's talk about it. What did Google find when it comes to what's an effective team? So let's go to the next slide. Drum roll, please. And that's a simple picture of what they have uncovered. First of all, you would see that the first one, and you've mentioned it, some of you did, is psychological safety. But there's others. There's dependability, structure and quality, meaning and impact. And I'm just wondering, as you're looking at this, and let me know in the chat, which of these, and you have some definitions here on the screen, do you find more impactful when you're in a team? Or you can give me a number or write a word. Which of these do you find when you think about A, your favorite team, and B, you think about how you know you're in a great team? Which of these would you actually see there? Which of these would you consider? So I'm looking forward to. There's always a delay on these LinkedIn lives, but no worries, because it's a prioritized list. And the first thing there is psychological safety. I would normally, if you would have your cameras on, ask for a raise of hand if you know what psychological safety is. But if you don't, well, you're in the right place to find out. So first of all, let's talk about this wonderful lady, Amy Edmondson. She has defined psychological safety as a belief that you will not be punished for speaking up, that you can feel a part of the team, and you will not hesitate to, talk about anything you need there. So you feel safe in making mistakes. And, she actually starts popularizing this term, I think, in early 2000s. And this wonderful book, The Fearless Organization, is something that she has published in 2018. And I think you might have heard about the term psychological safety. Thank you so much for your answers. Lots of ones, twos and threes. Lots of ones, which is important because I'll talk about psychological safety. Again, a belief that no one will be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, and mistakes. And the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. You feel like you can take risks. I guess it's quite important, isn't it, to be able to have that. And that's what Google discovered makes a great, amazing team. But what do you gain from having it? What does psychological safety give you? We've talked about how it feels to be a part of such team, and we'll talk about how you can get it done. But What's the benefit? Well, if you've been reading my articles, I've been quoting a great study by Gallup, and what they have found is 27% of reduction in turnover if you can make your team psychologically safe, and a 12% increase in productivity. That's quite a lot. And, let me know if you have psychological safety in your teams, if you've worked in a team that you felt was psychologically safe. And does this data feel like something, you would agree with? How was it, if you've ever had a chance, to work in a team that meets this definition of psychological safety? I have had such occasions. The wargaming team felt wonderful. We had good results, but sadly I moved away from my hometown. But there were some teams at work when that has happened. And it's been the best work of my life that I've been doing there. But I promised you a bit of a deep dive, so let's go. Why is it that this happens? What is it about psychological safety that can help you achieve these needs? So, if you dive a bit deeper, there was a wonderful person, David McCallum, and in the 1960s, he has developed the theory of needs. And one important, it's widely recognized academic work in the field of psychology, and I'll talk about psychology quite a bit today. But basically, what it means is most people really want to belong. Now, you've talked about it in the chat, how wonderful it is to have a great team, a great community. It comes from our deeply ingrained need for belonging and community. What's really interesting is and how it helps with engagement and retention seems to be obvious. If you want to, with retention, you want to be a part of the community. You want to feel like you belong in a team and an organization. So you do stay. And when things go wrong, you try fixing them because you feel like you belong. When you think about engagement and performance, the interesting thing here in productivity is the team mission. So let's talk about it just a bit. Because every team, every group of people has a purpose. Now, in terms of my wargaming team, was obviously having fun, but also winning games, traveling to tournaments. The release worker suppression, I definitely have to come back to that, Takoya. But the thing is, in work, and that's what Google has found, a mission of the team is to perform, is to add value, help people deliver services, whatever it might be. This is why myself as a trainer and also facilitator really believe in setting up the teams correctly so they can actually have a mission. But do you know what's really great and really reinforcing performance and engagement? The fact that if the team defines itself by its mission to perform and add value, belonging in a team means that you're fulfilling this mission. What do I mean by that? Well, think about like if you're in a sales team and you've got a sales quota or a sales target, or if you're in a sports team and you want to win games. If you have a need for affiliation, which most people really do because it's one of our basic needs, you want to do your best to achieve this mission, to sell, to win games, so you can feel like you belong. Think about that and let me know what you think about that, because it's interesting what you said, Lisa. It makes people feel empowered. Yes, it does, because it also helps people, if they understand what the need is, psychological safety enables them to fulfill this mission. So that's what I believe really drives people and motivates people. There's lots of theories of motivation that play into it. But essentially, psychological safety helps people feel like they belong to a team. And if a team has a mission to deliver value, everything improves. And if a team is a part of the organization that has a similar mission, everything can improve too and the organization can flourish. But you know what? Most consultants, trainers, or most webinar would probably end there. Go to like tools and stuff that you can do and just finish up. Everyone would be hunky-dory, smiley, and everything would be great. But sometimes what happens is, and oftentimes, as I do this work with people, there's an elephant in the room. Because I tell you, talking to a lot of people, and you could tell me if you feel the same, quite often it isn't easy to achieve psychological safety in an organization and in teams. Why? Well, because people don't really believe that this is something that can happen. It's like this fantasy team represents the fact that for many people, it is just fantasy. You know, when you think about it, and I would encourage you to reflect right now, would you actually, even if you believe me, even if you think like, all the logic I've given you and research is sound, is it something that you can just do in your organization? And many people, I'm guessing, and let me know in the chat if you feel like sharing, would say, well, it's kind of cool, but this big boss would never allow it because he's not a person like that. Or maybe you would see, well, it's great, but we're so overworked that it destroys any safety we would have. Or maybe, yeah, sounds cool, but, maybe it would happen in Google because they're all about beanbags and employee experience, not at our place. And to be honest, it's what I hear a lot. For many people, even if they would agree that this is something that they really want, that it would help them, if they would resonate with everything I say, as I'm sure many of you do, it is still challenging. And I think it's important to acknowledge that. Because it is. But you know what? I'll tell you how I do it. And I do hope that from that, you'll get your own experience in your own way of acknowledging and dealing with this problem. So, Canary Wharf. Corporate Disneyland of London. I've actually worked in 3 of these buildings. I will not name the particular client that the story will be about, but I wanted to tell you a story about myself working in an investment bank. And what happened for me is, for years, I've been working, and still am, in culture and leadership transformation programs. Now, investment banking banking and financial services have a reputation. I think you might agree that it's usually considered an area that is quite cutthroat. You would definitely think that, in an investment bank, and I have seen it, there are these situations where, from nowhere, a wonderful HR person comes in and next with a clipboard, and next to them, there's a security guard with a cardboard box. I've seen it more than once. This is how it goes. This is how it happens there. People live in fear, and that's how they sack employees. They escort them through the door. And, the crazy hours. A lot of the stuff that they say about what's called the bulge bracket is true. And I was, engaged to help them. And I did. I've been working with not teams, but teams of teams. So groups of teams, around 150 people that, had individual teams delivering various programs across the organization, connecting, trading, sales, and technology. And my experience is the following. It is possible to create psychological safety, but what I have found, it's important to show up that you really believe in it. Show as a person, a change agent, myself, that can start a fire and really work with the leaders of smaller groups, of these small pods, teams of teams, tribes, however you want to call it. And even if they're in a hostile environment, the bank might be, and it often is, and even if there are bosses, as you might have heard, like, there's this wonderful boss of JP Morgan, one of the buildings there, I haven't worked for them, so I can actually say that. And then, they've been recording his town halls, and the things that he says are nasty. And yet I know people at JP Morgan Chase, and they had created psychological safety. The organization might not be there, but there are pockets. And it's important to believe you can get there. But how, you might ask? Well, I've got something for you. First of all, what we need to talk about is the most important aspect that can make or break a leadership culture. And it is called the self-fulfilling prophecy. It's an interesting one, and let me just quickly look at the chat. Yes, the ideal team members are self-centered. Okay, thank you so much for your wonderful comments. Do you know the self-fulfilling prophecy, and do you know what it is? Let me know in the chat if you've experienced this term before. But if you haven't, well, I guess you're in the right place to talk about it. A self-fulfilling prophecy is a process for which an originally false assumption creates like a prophecy that makes itself true. Let me show you a bit of a diagram that can explain it a bit better. First of all, we all have beliefs. Again, a bit of jargon. Some of you might know McGregor's theory X and theory Y. If you don't, I'm sure you can look it up, but very quickly, theory Y is thinking about employees as showing up full of enthusiasm, wanting to add value, wanting to do their best and fulfill the mission. Theory X is the opposite. Close-minded, really trying to exploit the organization, really will do as little as possible to conserve energy. Now, this has been developed quite a few years ago, but if you find yourself as a leader, if you see leaders that subscribe to the theory X, if they believe theory X is true and like drive people 5 days into the office and whatnot, this influences expectations. This reinforces certain expectations. You believe it's true and you expect it to be true. It also influences your behavior. You don't trust people. A manager would micromanage. They will theoretically trust by check. A manager will not promote or delegate because they subscribe to this theory X. They have low expectations and they behave as if these expectations were true. And you know what happens is because we behave in such a way, that creates results. That creates a situation where other people adapt to our expectations and behaviors. I'm sure most of you have seen it. When you're being expected not to perform great, you probably won't. That's a huge issue because these results go back and they reinforce these beliefs. And you are in a vicious cycle. You are constantly, if you had the wrong beliefs or the beliefs that are unproductive, constantly in this cycle. That's an incredibly powerful mechanism that I find to be at the core of leadership and leadership transformation. It comes from the basic human instinct of cognitive dissonance, which is if I don't trust people, if I believe that employees are inherently unproductive and are just there to take a salary and I need to whip them, I want to see it true. Because cognitive dissonance means that I don't feel great when I see things that don't confirm my thoughts. So a question for you, and I think this is if you haven't heard about the self-fulfilling prophecy in leadership and management, definitely that's the big takeaway from today. For me, that's the most important and the biggest takeaway and the biggest point in any of my management training. The only way you can lead differently is if you start by believing that people will behave differently. that they will perform highly, that they will be highly engaged, motivated, and want to stay with you, want to be a part of the team, want to be a part of an organization in a fulfilling way. And they do. They absolutely do. If you remember, a couple of slides ago, I've shown you why that's the case. This is why Google has found it to work, because it's such a virtuous cycle. Because if you look at that, if you look at the self-fulfilling prophecy and you take psychological safety and you believe in these results, this will also create a prophecy, even if people aren't there yet. If you yourself, for instance, as an L&D or an HR professional, believe that your leaders are capable, your managers are capable of creating psychological safety, this self-fulfilling prophecy will work to your advantage. It will. And this is how I have done it throughout the years. Because what I've always been doing, and still am, and you can do this too, is to show up as a change agent, believing that this can happen. Living this belief, being the change you want to see in the world, makes it happen, because it starts, I know it sounds a bit silly, but it actually works. It starts with your belief. So my question to you then is, what do you believe? What do you hold as a belief about introducing psychological safety in the organization that you are in? You don't have to share, but I will encourage you to reflect. In silence, maybe won't be as energetic. I've had some feedback that I'm maybe too sleepy on my webinar, so I'm making a change there. But think about, what is the belief that you hold about where you are there and the ability to introduce psychological safety. Simple as that, right? It's okay to think it is hard. It's perfectly fine to even think that this particular boss will never change, or you're just too busy. That's the important. Juliet, thank you so much about the emotional contagion. I mean, doing my best, and knowing you are too. So thank you so much. You can share what your belief is, but if you don't want to, that's absolutely fine, because I am certain that many of you don't feel like, their organization can be psychologically safe, but I think it can. And I'm going to show you how to get there. I'm making a lot of promises, I guess, so I have to deliver. There's still a couple of minutes in the webinar, so hold to your seats. So let's go. The role of the manager. Now, why am I focusing so much on managers? Why do I believe that managers have a huge role to play? We like blaming managers for everything, don't we? Right? If you're in HR, if you're in L&D, again, a self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? If we think our managers are incapable, if we think our leadership is toxic and this wonderful person that you're thinking about will never do it, well, guess what? You've just created a self-fulfilling prophecy. Guess what happens? Exactly that. But why do I think the role of managers is such an important one in this equation? First of all, managers are there to manage the environment in the system, not necessarily the people as much. Like, people will find their way. Managers need to create the environment that is conducive for psychological safety. And I don't mean beanbags. No, I'll talk about what it is. It's showing up with the belief that psychological safety is possible. Showing up by sometimes even being vulnerable. Showing up and not criticizing mistakes, even admitting that mistakes are made. And, every boss has a boss. This is what really matters. In a way, if employees see that a manager made a mistake and the boss of the manager provided the psychological safety for the manager themselves because the manager was okay in sharing the mistake, the impact is tremendous. People see, not just hear or see the posters on the wall, they see the actual behaviors that make a difference. And yes, Thank you to Koya, but the small pockets. Well, sometimes you have to start with small pockets. You know, you can't turn a oil tanker on a dime, as they would say in the US. But the interesting thing here is once the fire started, chances are it will burn and be contagious, as you know, I think Juliet shared. All right, so the next thing is, as I've said, managers by their behavior are modeling culture. Don't think that your posters on the wall are modeling, modeling culture of your organization. That you say we're all about feedback, and it's not only the manager receiving and giving feedback in this instance, but actually showing that the whole organization is doing it by acting this way also with their own manager. Oh, I can see some wonderful chat. Yeah, but thank you. Keep it going. I love that. And yeah, it's yeah, companies that are a C are a day. Oh, that's a nice one. Okay, but there's more because managers also do one-to-ones. I'll talk about one-to-ones because, you know, if you've been to my previous webinar, you know that I'm all about the sincere one-to-ones, but in a moment. So, as we're nearing the end of this webinar, you will ask yourself, okay, you've promised me that you'll tell me what am I supposed to do about it, that you'll tell me how to create psychological safety in my organization. I'm not going to necessarily make you do so. I think it's all about the decision you make for yourself. But I'm going to tell you how I do that and how I believe that you can also benefit from my, success and the way I've done it. So there you go. So let's go into it a bit. I'll give you some practical tips. First of all, as difficult as it might seem, it actually isn't. Educate your managers and leaders about the self-fulfilling prophecy cycle. The easiest thing you can do is to show them this video. There's actually quite more videos on YouTube with people that possibly have a more friendly accent. But my lights are quite cool and I have cool plants. So, I've got something going for myself. Having said that, there are many ways that you can introduce this concept, and this is a popular psychological concept. What I would encourage you to do is, if you work with leaders, if you have leaders that you believe would appreciate, or you would appreciate them changing, my advice is to talk about what I've just talked about now when it comes to psychological safety and the self-fulfilling prophecy. Ask them the question, what are your beliefs about your employees? If someone comes to you and says, I need to sack this person because they're awful, this and that, like, what do you believe about this particular person? And then let me tell you about the about the self-fulfilling prophecy cycle. It's immensely powerful and most people don't know. So please educate them. This really opens people's eyes. Next is encourage the retrospectives on teamwork. Why am I not getting the next slide? I am. Encourage teamwork retrospectives. What do I mean by that? Well, if people work in teams, which they most often do, in some shape or form, what often is talked about in team meetings is work itself. Deadlines, plans, milestones, risks, whatnot, incidents. But rarely in organizations, and that's something I definitely introduce, people talk about how they work together. It's an immensely powerful aspect that's often neglected. People reflect on everything else, but somehow the way they work together and improving their own relationship in a team and their process of collaborating seems to be a taboo. I was like, unwritten rules. No, there are many wonderful tools to conduct a retrospective about teamwork. Not going to link to anything, but if you type teamwork retrospective, you'll find a bunch. And even asking the question, what is it that you would like to do differently? What is it that you like and don't like about your teamwork? Even this, as a manager, or even if you are in L&D and you're helping the team grow, can be immensely powerful. You don't have to do, special games, cards, Legos. So Legos actually fun. But you can do something very simple. Help people reflect on how they do together, and the name is a retrospective. Really powerful. And finally, you wouldn't have a webinar with me if I didn't talk about the sincere one-to-ones. If you want to know more about the sincere one-to-ones, check out my previous webinar. Link is not in the description, but I'm sure you'll find it. Essentially, managers, so teams are made of people. And, oh, I'm not showing slides. Teams are made of people, and people need to feel psychologically safe themselves before the team can be psychologically safe. Oh, I can see a lot of chunky comments. Walter and Toba, thank you for adding in. Well, okay. And the work by Carl Rogers and, yeah, unconditional positive regard. We're getting there. But it's also, you know what, as I'm reading these comments, Toba and Walter, there's one more thing I will add to it, which is what we also need to do is we need to meet people where they are. Maybe it's my fault to introduce a bit too much jargon today, talking about, some old academics in the field of psychology. But what we should be mindful of, and I always try to be, is especially, both first-time and experienced managers, they're just so busy with their stuff, so we need to use simple terms. If someone likes academia and you're an organization, that's fine, that's great. But I guess, a lot of you are consultants, L&D practitioners, so you're fine doing that, but don't bother your managers with that too much. You can highlight that, they can research themselves, but I would definitely not scare them away with big words. I'm not going to mention Severance, which is a great TV show. Like, why am I always talking about Severance? Anyways, the sincere one-to-ones. The most important thing the manager does, in a one-to-one, a manager creates a great relationship between themselves and their employee. And the most important thing is this is where they model the behavior of psychological safety, the right culture of leadership, and reinforce this, because if an employee feels safe with their manager, if the manager is a part of the team or somewhere in this configuration, it's much easier to create it. So these 3 tips, no fancy stuff. Educate your managers, show them the self-fulfilling prophecy cycle. It's simple as it is and really powerful. Retrospectives are a must-have and easy to do. And one-to-ones, if you want to make them effective, sincere one-to-ones are the way to go. Absolutely, I'm giving you 3 tips, very simple to implement. Of course, there's nuance. But I hope that with these, your belief and ability to succeed has improved. This is what I do. And this is how I've succeeded in quite a few organizations that had a challenging culture. By showing up with a self-fulfilling prophecy that this is possible, it has been. And it's not like, where there's a will, there's a way, and I'm a hippie. No. I've always said, I understand that there are difficulties, and I've talked to you about difficulties too. And it's okay to have empathy towards that. But it's also okay to believe things can change. And this is what I wish for you. As we're coming to our final minute, I have a call to action. And no, it's not a discount code for any training. I would like to let me know what you have learned today. What are you taking away from this webinar? I've been talking at you and waving my arms for the last 45 minutes, and I've seen your wonderful comments. I've seen how engaged you are. And you know what? I really hope that you have taken away a lot from this. But reflection is incredibly key. And sometimes our minds just likes to, say, let's put it aside. No, I want you to write it. Writing and journaling helps you remember. So please do journal and please share. What is it that you're taking away out of this webinar? Well, not only my plants and lighting setup or my Polish accent, but hopefully something that you have learned today. Maybe something that you will implement tomorrow, next week, or maybe at the next job you will find. With that, thank you so much for joining in. Thank you so much for being a part of this webinar. It's been an immense pleasure. I couldn't read all of your comments, but I've seen them streaming in. I've seen a lot of you here. Thank you so much for coming. And as always, I'll make sure to invite you to the next one. It's on the 15th of April. But for now, let me know what you've learned, and I hope to see you soon. Have an amazing afternoon, a great week, and stay believing in the great leadership culture that you can create. Bye-bye.